You know what's one of the most heartbreaking traps we fall into after someone leaves? We start secretly hoping they'll realize what they lost. We scroll their feed just to see if they look happy, or better yet, if they look sad. We listen to songs that feel like they're speaking directly to our situation. We imagine them lying awake at night, regretting, missing us, wishing they'd stayed, and it's not because we're weak, it's because we're human. We want to be seen, we want our love to have meant something, we want validation that we mattered, but let me say something that might sting at first. If you're sitting around waiting for someone to realize your worth, you've already handed your power to the one person who misused it. You're standing still, emotionally paused, hoping someone who made a choice to let you go will circle back and undo the damage, and that hope becomes a prison. Here's the brutal truth: they might never realize what they lost. And if they do, it might be too late, not just because you've moved on, but because time has shown you just how small they were in comparison to the love you are capable of giving and the life you are meant to live. You don't get stronger by waiting, you get stronger by walking, because every moment you're sitting in that emotional waiting room, they're not losing anything. But you are. You're losing time, energy, self-respect, and joy you could be pouring into your own life. Let me walk you through 3 shifts that will set you free from this pattern, not just for this heartbreak, but for anything that comes next. There's a moment that comes after a breakup, a moment where silence becomes louder than any argument, where absence takes up more space than presence ever did. And in that moment, you're left asking a question you didn't expect to ask. Will they ever realize what they lost? And underneath that question, what you're really asking is, was I enough? Did I matter? Was it real? You're not weak for asking those questions, you're human, because when someone walks away, especially someone you gave your heart to, it's not just the absence of their presence that hurts. It's the absence of understanding, the not knowing, the emotional cliffhanger that makes you feel like your story got cut off before the final chapter. So what do? We wait. Not physically, maybe. We still go to work, we still see friends, we still smile in photos, but internally we're paused, like a movie frozen on the frame where they left, waiting, hoping they'll come back, hoping they'll text, hoping they'll realize, hoping they'll say, I made a mistake, I see it now, I should have never left. And what's wild is, we think that moment, if it comes, will finally bring peace. We think we'll exhale, finally, when they say the words we've been dying to hear. That validation will make the pain worth it, that their regret will be our reward, but here's the truth, a truth I wish more of us heard sooner. Closure doesn't come from them, it comes from clarity. And the moment you understand that is the moment you stop waiting for something that might never come, and start walking towards something that's already within you. Let me explain why we crave closure from them. Let's start by being honest. The desire for closure is a deeply emotional need. It's about more than just understanding. It's about being seen. It's about wanting the pain to have a reason, a purpose, a clean ending. When someone breaks our heart, especially without explanation or without acknowledging the depth of what we shared, we often feel like we've been erased. Like all the moments, all the memories, all the I love yous were just a one-sided fantasy, that maybe they didn't feel it the way we did, that maybe we imagined the connection, so we crave confirmation. We want them to say it mattered. We want them to say they miss us. We want to feel like it wasn't all in our head, like our love wasn't a joke to them. But here's the problem, even when they do say those things, when they text months later and say, I've been thinking about you, or I miss what we had, or even you were the best thing that ever happened to me, it still doesn't always feel the way we thought it would, because here's what we often find out the hard way: even if they realize what they lost, it doesn't fix the fact that they lost it. Realization is not the same thing as redemption. Regret is not the same thing as return. Recognition is not the same thing as reconciliation. So when we place all our healing in the hands of someone else's awareness, we make our peace dependent on their process. And that's dangerous because you don't know how long they'll take to grow. You don't know if they ever will, and more importantly, you don't know if you'll even want them anymore by the time they do. You can't afford to build your healing timeline around someone who might never show up. The illusion of if only. If only they understood what I was trying to give them. If only they saw how loyal I was. If only they knew what they walked away from. Let me gently challenge you, even if they did, would that change the fact that they still walked away? We often confuse awareness with action. We think if they realize their mistake, that somehow undoes the hurt. But it doesn't. If they saw your value and still couldn't love you right, that's not a misunderstanding, that's clarity. And that's the painful paradox of real clarity. It doesn't always feel good. In fact, it can break your heart. Because when you finally understand that they did know what they had, and still chose not to cherish it, it forces you to stop romanticizing the past. That's where true closure begins, not when they understand, but when you do. The shift from why did they leave to why do I still need them to explain it. Let's go deeper. Why are we so hooked on the idea that they owe us something to move on? Because we're trying to organize the pain. We're trying to assign logic to something that feels like chaos. And in the absence of closure, our mind keeps the loop open, replaying, rewinding, reimagining, trying to fill in the blanks. But here's the thing, some people don't leave because they didn't love you. Some people leave because they didn't know how to. Some people leave because they were too broken. Some people leave because they couldn't meet your depth. And some people leave simply because they didn't care enough to stay. And sometimes, the why doesn't change the what. They left, they hurt you, they didn't fight for you, and maybe that's the only closure you need. Closure isn't about solving the puzzle of their behavior. It's about recognizing that your peace is more important than their explanation, that no sentence they could offer will rebuild what their silence already destroyed. You deserve a life that isn't built around unspoken apologies. You deserve a love that doesn't require translation. You deserve to wake up one day and realize that you don't need their understanding to be okay. You just need your own. What real clarity sounds like, let me paint a picture. Real clarity doesn't sound like, they made a mistake and I hope they fix it. It sounds like this, I gave everything I could. I showed up with honesty. I tried. I loved fully. And if they couldn't see that, if they didn't want to match that, then they don't deserve to have a seat at my table. Real clarity is no longer needing someone to regret losing you to feel confident that you were worth keeping. It's not waiting for them to realize, it's realizing it yourself. It's standing in front of the mirror, maybe with tears in your eyes, and saying, they didn't choose me, but I'm choosing me now. It's wiping your own tears. It's closing the chapter not because it makes sense, but because it no longer serves you to reread it. Clarity says they walked away, that's their decision, but how long I wait, that's mine. Letting go without bitterness, there's one more piece of this that matters. Letting go through clarity is not the same thing as letting go through bitterness. Bitterness says, I hope they suffer. Clarity says, whether they do or not has nothing to do with me anymore. Bitterness chains you to them in a different way. It still makes your healing about their punishment. But clarity frees you. It says, I don't need revenge, I need peace. I don't need their closure, I need my future. I don't need them to miss me. I need to stop missing myself while waiting for them. There's something beautifully powerful about choosing to move forward without needing to be avenged. You're not letting them off the hook. You're just unhooking yourself from their story. And that might be the most radical, rebellious act of healing you ever do. The new question, what now? Once you stop asking, will they realize what they lost? You begin to ask a new question, what now? And that question opens the door to your life again. What now means, what do I want to do with my time? What kind of peace do I want to cultivate? What kind of people do I want around me? What standards will I raise? What version of me have I been ignoring? What now means your focus turns inward, not in a way that blames you, but in a way that builds you. It's not about what they didn't see in you. It's about what you're about to discover in yourself. Clarity leads to compassion, but also boundaries. One of the most mature things you can do in heartbreak is to say, I understand they were limited. I understand they didn't have the tools. I understand they didn't know how to love me the way I needed. But then add, and I still deserve someone who does. Compassion is not permission to stay stuck. Empathy is not a justification to let someone back in. Clarity is saying, I can understand you and still not invite you back into my life. You can forgive someone and still block their number. You can wish someone healing and still move on. You can love someone and still recognize they are not your person. Clarity draws the line between compassion and self-abandonment, and it gives you back your dignity. Conclusion: you're not waiting anymore, let them go. Let the version of the story where they finally realize what they lost fade. Not because you're giving up on love, but because you're giving up on fantasy. Because you've decided that the greatest form of love is not being chosen by someone who couldn't see you. It's choosing yourself, even when they didn't. It's standing tall in the ruins of what they walked away from, and building something sacred with what they left behind. Your courage, your heart, your fire, and it starts here, with clarity, with your choice to stop waiting. Because healing doesn't begin when they realize what they lost. It begins when you realize what you never needed. There's a belief many of us quietly adopt after heartbreak, whether we speak it out loud or just carry it in the weight of our pain. It goes like this: maybe I was just meant to be their lesson. Maybe they'll treat the next person better because of what they learned from me. We say it like we're proud. We say it like a consolation prize. As if being someone's emotional training ground somehow dignifies our suffering, as if we were the necessary heartbreak in their story so they could become better for someone else. But let me ask you something, and I want you to really feel this in your bones. Do you truly believe your purpose in someone's life is to be the person they hurt in order to grow? That your role was to give your best, only for them to throw it away and then walk into their next relationship more ready? Because let me tell you something that might challenge the narrative you've been comforting yourself with. You are not a lesson. You are a life they no longer get access to. You're not a stepping stone. You're not a checkpoint on their emotional maturity map. You're not the person who should have to bleed so they can become whole. You are your own story, your own universe, your own full and vibrant life. And if someone didn't recognize that when they had you, they squandered the chance to grow with you instead of after you, then the loss is theirs to carry. But the mistake, that doesn't define you. Let's break this down. Why we romanticize being the lesson. Let's be honest. When someone breaks our heart and doesn't come back, we need to make sense of the pain. We need to find some kind of meaning in it all. And so we say, at least they'll think twice before doing this to the next person. We tell ourselves, maybe I softened them. Maybe I taught them what love really means. Or worse, I was the one who finally cracked them open, and now they'll be able to love someone else better. But here's the danger in that kind of thinking. It creates the illusion that our heartbreak had to happen in order for them to become someone better. It makes your love feel like a sacrifice instead of a sacred thing that should have been protected and honored in real time. You become the training wheels for someone else's eventual love story. And while it may feel empowering to believe you helped someone evolve, it often comes at the cost of your own worth, because deep down that narrative still centers them, their healing, their growth, their timeline. It makes your heart break about them again, and that's the very pattern we're here to break. You are not a trial run for love. Let's make something very clear. You are not anyone's emotional practice round. Your heart is not a classroom. Your love is not homework. Your time, energy, vulnerability, and loyalty were not just tools someone else used to finally figure themselves out. You are not the one who taught them how to love. That's not a badge of honor. It's a wound disguised as wisdom. Why? Because it keeps you holding on to hope, to imaginary conversations, to the belief that maybe one day they'll circle back with their newfound emotional intelligence and say, you were the one all along. But do you know what's more powerful than being the one they learned from, being the one who learned something for yourself, being the one who didn't wait, being the one who grew stronger, more self-aware, more whole, not because of their absence, but because of your choice to rise in spite of it. You don't owe anyone your heartbreak so they can become someone else's happy ending. The danger of letting someone back after they grow. Let's say, for a moment, they do come back. They realize what they lost. They say they've changed, they've done the work. They've read the books, gone to therapy, meditated, journaled, prayed, and now they say, I'm ready. It's tempting, isn't it? Because now you're finally hearing everything you wanted back then. Now they get it. Now they see you. Now they're emotionally available, communicative, tender. But here's the question you must ask yourself. Why did it take losing you for them to grow? Why did your heartbreak have to be the wake-up call? Why couldn't they evolve with you, for you, alongside you, while they still had access to the beauty, the consistency, and the soul you brought into their life? Here's the truth. Growth that comes at the cost of hurting someone else is growth that carries a stain. And while people do change, while it's possible for someone to evolve after losing you, it doesn't mean you owe them a second chance. Not all growth stories require a reunion. Sometimes the most powerful chapter of your story is the one where you don't reopen the door. Because when someone walks away from you, or betrays you, or breaks your trust, they don't just lose the chance to love you, they lose the privilege. You are the reward, not the consequence. Do you realize how much value you bring? Do you understand that your love is a privilege, not a punishment? Too often we give people our hearts before they've earned the right to carry them. We pour ourselves into people hoping they'll become ready, hoping they'll see our worth, hoping they'll rise into the person we believe they can be. But here's what happens when you give someone the rewards of commitment without character to sustain it. You devalue yourself. You offer a palace to someone still living like a wanderer. You give the prize to someone who hasn't shown up to run the race. You are not someone's motivator. You are not their life coach. You are not here to babysit someone's growth while sacrificing your own. Your love is sacred. Your loyalty is rare. Your emotional depth is not something to be trialed, tested, or taken for granted. So if someone couldn't recognize that while they had access to it, then the consequence is this: they don't get access to it anymore. Not because you're petty, not because you're bitter, but because you now understand that you are the reward, and not everyone gets the prize. You are a life, not a chapter in someone else's journey. We all like to believe we're the main character in our own story, but after heartbreak, it often feels like we were just a side character in theirs. They move on, they grow, they glow up, and we're left wondering if we were just a footnote in their evolution. But let me remind you of something. You are not just a chapter in someone else's story. You are an entire life. You are not an experience someone had. You are an experience someone lost. Your depth, your laughter, your presence, your mind, those are not plot devices for someone else's redemption arc. They are the essence of a life fully lived. The fact that someone couldn't meet you there doesn't mean your love was too much. It means they were too little for the kind of connection you're here to build, and it's not your job to make yourself smaller so someone else can fit. You're not waiting to be written back into their story. You're writing your own, this time without needing them in the ending. What it means to revoke access, here's what it means. When you say, they no longer get access to me, it means they don't get to check in when they're lonely. They don't get to text you just to see if you still care. They don't get to keep one foot in your life and one foot out. They don't get to lean on your emotional availability when their world is unstable. Access is not love. Access is not friendship. Access is not harmless. It's a door, and every time you open it again for someone who abused it, you tell yourself, my boundaries are optional, but not anymore. You're not cruel for closing the door. You're not cold for cutting contact. You're not mean for protecting your space. You're just done explaining why your heart is not a revolving door. You're done letting the same person teach you the same lesson twice. You're done confusing availability with love. When you let go, you teach a different lesson. There's an irony here. When you finally let go, not with resentment but with clarity, You do end up teaching them something, but not in the way you thought. You teach them that access to you is not guaranteed. You teach them that they can't come and go as they please. You teach them that good hearts walk away too. You teach them that growth comes with consequences, but most importantly, you teach yourself something, that you don't need to be the one who stays behind hoping they'll realize. You don't need to be the one who watches them get better for someone else. You don't need to be anyone's emotional stepping stone. You don't need to carry the burden of being unforgettable just so you feel significant, because you are not significant because they remember you. You're significant because you remembered who you were, and now you've outgrown the need to be remembered by someone who couldn't even recognize you when it mattered. Final thought. You are the ending they don't get. They don't get to finish your story. They don't get the happy ending after walking out midway through. They don't get to mature on your heartbreak and then come back for more. You are not the lesson. You are the life they no longer get access to, and if they ever do realize what they lost, let it be from a distance, because you've already walked too far ahead to turn around now. There is a moment that quietly shifts everything, not with noise, not with closure, not with their apology or regret, but with a silent decision made deep within you. That moment is when you stop waiting, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. The moment your heart says, I no longer need to be chosen to feel worthy. I no longer need them to see me to feel real. And something incredible happens when you stop waiting. You begin to heal, not just move on, not just distract yourself, not just get over it, but actually heal. Not the surface level kind of healing where you pretend you're fine and post the picture and play it cool, but the real deep internal healing where you start to return to yourself, where you remember who you were before they left, where you remember that the life you put on hold waiting for them is still yours to live. But let's be honest, the hardest part of any heartbreak isn't always the goodbye. It's the waiting that comes after it. It's the unanswered questions, the fantasies we replay, the belief that maybe, just maybe, they'll come back, they'll realize, they'll change. You're not weak for waiting. You're not naive for holding on to hope. You're human. You loved, believed, you wanted it to work, but the very love that made you wait is the same love you now need to give to yourself, because healing isn't about them. It's not about what they do, what they realize, or if they ever come back. Healing begins when you stop tying your peace to their return. So let's talk about what that really looks like. Why we keep waiting even when we know we shouldn't. We don't wait because we enjoy suffering. We wait because the idea of letting go feels worse than holding on. Because letting go feels like accepting that the story didn't end the way we wanted. It feels like giving up on the potential we saw. It feels like admitting that something we poured ourselves into didn't work, and no one wants to accept that. So instead we wait, we check our phones, we relive old conversations, we look for signs in the smallest things, we replay the last time they smiled at us, the last time they held us, the last thing they said before things started unraveling, because in the waiting there's still possibility, there's still a thread we haven't cut, there's still a world where they come back and everything makes sense. But here's what we need to realize. Waiting doesn't preserve love, it delays healing. Waiting keeps you emotionally tethered to someone who may have already moved on, and the cruelest part is, the longer you wait, the more you start shrinking. You stop dreaming, you stop showing up for yourself, you stop believing that life could be full again without them. Waiting becomes a silent agreement with your pain. I'll stay here until they come back. But what if they never do? Do you really want to keep pressing pause on your joy, your peace, your evolution, because of someone who pressed stop? Healing begins with a decision, not an explanation. One of the most painful illusions we carry is the belief that we need an explanation to move on. We think, if I just understood why they left, I could let go. If they just said it wasn't my fault, I'd feel okay. If they just explained what changed, I could stop wondering. But healing doesn't come from getting every answer. It comes from realizing that no answer will ever be enough to justify the pain they caused, that no excuse will ever match the depth of your heartbreak, that no reasoning will undo the absence they left behind. You don't need their words to walk away. You need your decision to choose peace over clarity, your decision to choose movement over memories, your decision to close the door, not because they knocked, but because you're done waiting for someone who lost the right to come in. Healing is a choice. And every day you stay in the waiting room is a day you delay your own freedom. You stop waiting the day you remember who you are. There's a moment in healing that feels like a sunrise. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's subtle, like a shift in the wind or the light changing in the room. You wake up one day and you realize, I'm still here, still breathing, still worthy, still capable of joy, still full of love. That moment doesn't come because they texted. It doesn't come because they apologized or came back. It comes because you finally turned your gaze inward. The pain starts to fade. When you stop chasing someone who couldn't hold your heart and start becoming someone who protects it, and that means you begin to remember you were enough all along. Their inability to see you was their blindness, not your invisibility. Your love wasn't wasted. It was pure. It was real, and one day someone else will be ready to receive it the way you deserve. But that starts when you stop waiting for them to realize what they lost and start realizing what you still have, yourself. What you gain when you finally stop waiting. You don't just get your time back. You don't just get your peace back. You get clarity. You start seeing the relationship for what it really was, not the highlight reel, but the whole picture, the missed moments, the emotional unavailability, the way you had to dim yourself just to keep the peace. You stop romanticizing the past and start grounding yourself in the present. You get self-respect because every time you say, I'm not waiting anymore, you reclaim your power. You teach yourself that your worth isn't tied to being chosen, that you don't need to be missed to feel meaningful. You get energy, the emotional exhaustion that comes from wondering, wishing, hoping. It begins to lift, your mind starts to quiet, your soul starts to breathe again. You get vision, you begin to look forward instead of backward. You begin to imagine a future where love feels safe, where connection is mutual, where you don't have to beg for the bare minimum, and most of all, the version of you that got buried under overthinking, the version of you that got quiet to avoid conflict, the version of you that waited for love instead of walking in it. She's still there, he's still there, you're still there, waiting for you to stop waiting for them. Healing is messy, but so is growth. Let's not pretend this is easy. The moment you stop waiting doesn't always feel empowering at first. Sometimes it feels like grief, like letting go of the last bit of hope you were clinging to, like a death of a version of the future you once believed in. You might cry, you might ache, you might second guess yourself 100 times, but the pain you feel when you stop waiting is the pain of detoxing, of weaning off the emotional attachment, of breaking the cycle that's kept you in limbo. And the truth is that pain is necessary. It's not the sign you're doing it wrong, it's the sign you're doing it right. Healing is messy, it comes in waves. You'll have days where you feel strong and days where all you want is to hear from them. You'll have moments where you're sure you've moved on, then something reminds you and you collapse again. That's okay, because healing isn't linear, it's not clean, but it is worth it. Every time you choose not to check their social media, every time you resist replying to their vague hope you're good text, every time you stay on your own path instead of rerouting for their convenience, you heal, you become less available for pain and more available for peace. And that's the goal. This is the part where you come back to life if you've made it this far. Emotionally, spiritually, even reading this. Let me say something to you directly. You are not meant to live your life on pause. You are not meant to anchor your heart to someone who sailed away. You are not meant to wait for someone to come back in order to feel whole. This is the part where you come back to life. This is the part where you reclaim the mornings you lost, where you start saying yes to the people who do show up, where you open your heart, not to them, but to yourself, where you start dancing in your living room again, where you start laughing with your friends without guilt, where you start dreaming again, not of them, but of what you want next. This is the part where you become the version of you they'll never get to meet. And maybe that's the most beautiful kind of closure, not them finally realizing what they lost, but you finally realizing what you gained when you stopped waiting. Final thought, you're not behind. You're becoming the moment you stop waiting isn't the moment you fall behind. It's the moment you start becoming more free, more whole, more grounded, more awake to your worth, more available to the kind of love that won't make you wait to feel seen. You are not too late. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are exactly where you need to be to begin again. And if they never come back, then maybe that was the greatest gift, because in their absence you found your strength, you found your voice, you found your peace, and in the end you didn't need them to realize what they lost. You just needed to stop waiting long enough to remember what was never gone. You